Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars. You're watching another one of my YouTube guitar building videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I hope that by the end of this video, I'll have earned your subscription. What I'm going to be talking about today is part 20 of my neck through guitar build. Now, in the last episode, part 19, I had said that for this episode, I was going to level, crown, and dress the frets. However, I ran into a little bit of a problem. The finish I was intending to use on the fretboard didn't work. What I ended up doing was following my own advice. Before applying the finish, I tested it on some scrap. The same wood, same species of wood that I use for the fretboard, which is Paduke. What I found was that finish, which was Sutherland Wells Botanical Polymerized Tung Oil, it didn't dry. For some reason, after 3 days, it was still pretty tacky. Now, I suppose if I had left it to sit longer, it would have eventually dried. But I didn't want to wait around and find out because I've got a time crunch here that I'm working under. So I decided instead what I would do is go with a finish that I know will work. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to show you how I prepped the wood and then how I mixed up this finish and then applied it. So I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer and show you what's involved. The first thing I have to do is prep the wood, and the way I'm going to do that is to rub out the surface of the wood with 3 different grades of Norton's synthetic steel wool. I'll put a link in the description below. They actually sell 4 different grades. The coarsest is this red. But this is a bit too coarse for what I need to use here. So I'm going to go with the green, which is coarse, the gray, which is a medium, and then the white, which is a fine grade. And the way I use it is pretty simple. I just simply start out right up against the fret, and I'll rub it out, work my way across. Then I move up to the next fret, right up against the edge, and move roughly 1/2 to 3/4 of the way across, moving back and forth. Then I move up to the next fret. I'll do the same thing. And I'll just continue all the way along the fretboard, all the way to the end, all the way to the heel. Then I'll switch and go up against the other side of the fret and move my way across. That way I can be assured that I have covered the entire expanse of wood between each fret wire. And I'll continue with the coarse all the way along the fretboard. Then I'll move on to the medium grade, and I'll do basically just the same thing. Starting on, I'm actually working on the tuner side of the fret wire as I move down the fretboard. And I'll just continue until I have reached the heel. Then I'll switch around and do the same thing again. This way I can be sure that I haven't missed any spots. And what this is doing is it's smoothing out the wood in case there are any scratches or dings or anything that may have occurred during the fret installation process. Sometimes when, because I always glue my frets in, and sometimes that glue will seep out along the edge of the fret onto the wood. So this will remove it. And then when I get to the white synthetic steel wool, this is the smoothest, and it almost puts a polish on it. I love these synthetic steel wool pads because they are really useful, not only for what you see me doing here, but later on when I go to polish the frets. They work great, and they don't leave any sort of fine particle residue on the surface like often happens when you're using actual steel wool. I try never to use actual steel wool on a guitar, ever. I learned the hard way that can really mess things up. But I'll continue all the way along the fretboard. I'll get that completely finished. And then I will mix the product that I'm going to be using to finish this. In fact, that's going to be the next step. All right, the product that I'm going to be applying to the fretboard is good old boiled linseed oil. When it comes to applying a finish on a dark wood, you don't need to put down like a clear lacquer as you would on maple. All you need to do is apply an oil which is going to enhance the appearance of the wood. It will also seal the wood, which prevents it from absorbing and expelling humidity. When it's really humid, the wood can swell. When the air dries out, the moisture in the wood leaves the wood and the wood shrinks, and that's why you get fret sprout. So by sealing it, we reduce the potential for the wood to expand or shrink as the moisture levels in the air change. Now, you can't use just any kind of oil. You've got to use a drying oil. And the two drying oils that are common are tung oil and linseed oil. Now, if you use pure tung oil, that can take weeks, if not months, to completely dry. Same thing is true with raw linseed oil. It can actually take years to dry, and in truth, it never really fully dries. As a result, the surface of the wood attracts grime and dirt, and it just can be really pain to clean and take care of. So it's recommended that you use, for example, the polymerized tung oil, like I mentioned, but of course you need to test it on the wood, as I did, to make sure it's going to work with the species that you're applying it to. And as I found here, it doesn't work. Or it was going to take longer to dry than I was willing to wait around for. Boiled linseed oil is very similar to polymerized tung oil in that the drying process has been triggered. But in the case of boiled linseed oil, it's triggered by the addition of a drying agent. Now, if you purchase a commercially made fretboard oil, like StuMax sells a commercially made fretboard oil, it is essentially linseed oil with a drying agent added to it. So it's really no different than the boiled linseed oil. Now, I'm sure the folks at StuMax will say, oh yeah, but ours is specially formulated with certain ratio of oil and dryers and that sort of thing. It's basically the same thing. It's a linseed oil with a drying agent. Now, I'm going to use the boiled linseed oil, but if I applied just the boiled linseed oil as is on the fretboard, it would probably take about 2 weeks to fully dry and cure. I don't want to wait 2 weeks. So I'm going to kick it up with a product from Grumbacher called Cobalt Dryer. Again, I'm going to put links in the description down below for these products. But what this product is it's a cobalt dryer that I can add in a very tiny amount to the oil, and it will dramatically decrease its dry time. So I will be able to apply it, and then in less than probably 24 hours, that oil should be completely dry. So what I've done is I have poured just enough oil. I've got just a tiny amount in here, and it's just enough to do the fretboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a tiny amount of the cobalt dryer, and I'll mix it in just using a brush. And I'm just going to dip it in because you don't need that much. And then I'll just stir it in, thoroughly mix it in. Even the amount that I put on with the brush is probably too much, but it's not going to hurt anything. If I do too much, it'll just make it dry even faster. Okay. The Cobalt Dryer works a lot like a product that I used to use called Japan Dryer, but Japan Dryer has become really difficult to source. So I found this, and I also have learned that this might be a safer product to use than regular Japan Dryer. Now, to clean the brush, I just need to use mineral spirits. So then what I'll do is I'm going to put on some gloves because I don't want to get the stuff on my fingers. It's just messy. It's not that it's harmful or toxic. It's just messy. And then I'm using my lint-free stain application cloths, And then I will just get some of that onto the cloth. And then just dab it onto the fretboard. And I will start to wipe it into the wood. I try to be somewhat liberal in the application, but I don't want it to be so wet that it actually drips down the side of the neck. I just want to apply it to the top surface of the fretboard. And I want to make sure as I apply it that it is soaking into the wood all the way up against the edges of the frets. You don't want to leave any gaps there because you will notice those later on. All right, so I've got that pretty well covered. And what I'm going to do now is I will let it sit for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'm going to wipe off any excess that remains. All right, so the oil has been soaking into the wood for the past, well, it's been more than 30 minutes. And I can start to see spots where the oil has soaked into the wood and other areas where it's still kind of pooled up on the surface. But at this point, I can go ahead and wipe off the excess. Now, I'm a big advocate for allowing the oil to sit for as long as possible before you wipe it off. However, because of the addition of the cobalt dryer, you don't want to let it sit too long, otherwise it's going to start to tack up, and then it becomes really difficult to wipe it off. So not only am I going to be removing it from the surface of the wood, but I'm also wiping it off of the fret wire itself. And I'm leaving just a very thin film on the surface of the wood. So that's going to do a good job of sealing the wood. It's going to look really fantastic. And it'll dry pretty quick. So I'll be able to continue on with this build. And that means hopefully by the next episode, part 21, I'll be able to level crown and dress and polish the frets just prior to doing all the final assembly. Let's keep our fingers crossed. You never know what could happen, but I'm pretty confident that that's what's going to happen in the next episode. So, as always, I hope that you enjoyed this. If so, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, again, welcome. I hope that I've earned your subscription. And until the next episode, take care, stay safe, and I hope you'll be back.